Darius was put in place by Cyrus. And so you're going to hear the name Cyrus at the end. He is the one who comes in and conquers, but then he sets up a king. So there's 3 kings that Daniel serves under. All right, so at the beginning of this, the history that the Hebrews would have understood is what you're going to learn in the next couple of minutes, okay? So Israel at one point was one big country, okay, that got established. Because of sin and because of idol worship and because of a lot of political things that go on, the country gets divided in 2, okay? To the north, they keep the name Israel, okay? And there's about 10 tribes who stay up here in the north, the northern kingdom. In the southern kingdom, they take the name Judah. Judah is one of 2 tribes that stay down here. Benjamin is the other one. All the other 10 stay up north. But here in Judah, we have the capital. We have Jerusalem. Okay, so Jerusalem becomes very important. Jerusalem is in Judah. Okay? Now, at the time of Daniel, the northern kingdom has actually fallen to the Assyrians. So the Assyrians come in, they invade the northern kingdom, and they export people. They scatter people, and they send them away. Okay? But they can't cross this line because God has told them that he's going to protect them, okay? So this southern kingdom actually sticks around for about another 100 years, okay? Assyria is not able to infiltrate in. Even though they try, they can't get into Judah, okay? So the southern kingdom sticks around for about another 100 years. Well, in that 100 years, Judah had a chance to redeem itself. Because of sin, because of idol worship, because of political stuff, it does not. And so God decides to send judgment on Judah, okay? So that judgment is what leads into Daniel. Okay, so this is very important of why this is all going on. All right, so let's read the first 2 verses, and then I'm going to explain to you what the Hebrews would have heard. Okay, so Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with some of the vessels of the house of God. And he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. Okay? So those 2 verses alone actually cover a couple of years of these 3 sieges. Okay? So let's go back in history a little bit. So these 2 parts of the country have kings that are established over them. Judah has one last good king. Okay, we have lots of bad kings. We have some good kings. We have one final good king, and his name is Josiah. Okay, now King Josiah, when he came to the throne, he was only 8 years old. Could you imagine running a whole country at 8 years old? Okay? He is 8 years old when he comes to the throne. But because he is a good king, God actually gives him 31 years of reign, which is unheard of at this point, okay? There are so many kings that happen in the northern and southern, like they're just getting taken out one by one because of their sin. King Josiah is a good king, so he reigns for 31 years over Judah. Now he has 4 sons. Okay, the first one is Johanna. Okay, his second son, these are their original Hebrew names. We're going to talk about names a lot. Is Eliakim. He has a 3rd son, Mattaniah, and then he has a 4th son, Shallum. Okay, so he has 4 sons. Now, Johanna, we know nothing about. After he is listed in Chronicles and Kings, he's never spoken about again. The assumption is that at some point in all of these battles, he dies in battle. Okay, so we don't know anything about him other than his name and that he was firstborn. So it's assumed that he passes away in battle. All right, so after Josiah dies in battle, now we have a throne that is empty. Okay, so we got to fill the throne. So if you were choosing who to be on the throne next, who would you choose? out of the three that are left?
How do you say the second one?
Eliakim? You would choose Eliakim. The people don't. The people choose the fourth son, okay, and they rename him. He is Joaz. Okay, so he becomes king. The people elect him to become king. This is probably because there was a lot of political things going on, and they probably didn't align with these two, so they picked this third one and they crowned him king. Okay, so he's king now, to the dismay of his two older brothers, but he is king. Now, he is only king for 3 months. Just 3 months. And he does so much evil in that 3 months that God says, yeah, you're not my king. Okay? And God judges him. And he has the Pharaoh of Egypt, a Pharaoh who we know by the name Necho. Pharaoh Necho II. Okay? So he comes in to Judah and he captures Jehoaz. Okay? Eventually, in captivity, Jehoaz dies. So he dies in captivity in Egypt. Okay? And that Pharaoh, Pharaoh Necho, decides that, hey, there's a throne empty. We're going to put somebody on it. He chooses Eliakim, okay, secondborn. And Pharaoh, changes Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim. Okay, pretty similar naming here. Jehoiakim means Yahweh rises up. Who rose Jehoiakim up? Pharaoh. Isn't that interesting? And we have this contradiction here that we have Pharaoh, an Egyptian king, who chooses this man to become the next king of Judah, but he names him Yahweh raises up. Okay? So, he raises him up, he is now king of Judah. And thus begins the 3 sieges of Jerusalem. So Jehoiakim, he's king. Everything's going really well, right? Him and Pharaoh Necho are having this alliance going on, okay? But over here in Babylon, we have a king's son who is called Nebuchadnezzar. Or Nebuchadnezzar. Because there is a B in his name. Okay. So he's a prince at this point. He's not really king, but he really wants to be king. So he's going to decide, okay, that the Pharaoh is going to come up against him. And the Pharaoh of Egypt is going to go invade Babylon. Now this was a big step, because Babylon's pretty big at this point. And they're spreading out. And Egypt goes, we're not going to have this. So we're going to go to Babylon and we're going to fight. Bad choice. Bad choice. So Nebuchadnezzar, as prince, he defeats them. Okay? And along the way, down to Egypt, he swings into Jerusalem. Because Eliakim is in a confederation with Egypt. Okay? So he swings through Israel and he said, I'm going to show you how powerful I am. And this is the first siege that happens on Jerusalem. Okay? So this is roughly about 605 BC. We have our first siege. Okay? So he subdues Judah and he takes their royalty. He takes Daniel. He takes Daniel's 3 friends and he takes a lot of the other royalty. Okay? He snatches them up and takes them back to Babylon. Okay? And he sends Egypt packing. He sends them back. Alright. He also takes Jehoiakim back to Babylon. Okay? And he tells them, you have to pay tribute to me now. Okay? You're no longer loyal to Egypt, you're now loyal to me. You have to pay tribute to me, and this becomes important. So for a few years, Jehoiakim does. He pays tribute to Babylon. He keeps Nebuchadnezzar happy. He pays tribute to Babylon. Okay? Eventually, he rebels. He doesn't want to be in alliance with Babylon anymore. He doesn't want to pay tribute to him. They're not friendly to Babylon. They don't want to do it. Okay? And he turns back to Egypt for help. And he said, listen, Egypt, come help us. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to pay tribute to him. Right? During this time as well, Jehoiakim is doing evil in the sight of the Lord. And God sends a prophet. He sends Jeremiah to him. Okay? He sends Jeremiah to predict a very, very violent death to Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim doesn't listen. He continues on with his plan. Okay? So meanwhile, Nebuchadnezzar hears about all of this that is going on, this alliance, and he decides to go back. Okay? And he's going to ransack. Okay? This leads into our second siege. This is roughly about 597 BC. And this is the one that most people remember because it was awful. Okay? He ransacks the entire country. He takes down Jerusalem. And Jehoiakim is killed exactly as Jeremiah predicts. Okay? It's an absolute violent death, and his body is thrown over the wall, and I mean, it's very detailed in Jeremiah, and it happens exactly as Jeremiah told him it was going to happen. Okay? So, Nebuchadnezzar is now in Jerusalem. He takes control over it. He starts looting. He takes pieces from the temple. Okay? He takes the furnishings that are inside the temple, and he takes them back to Babylon, and he puts them in the house of his God. Now you're thinking, why would you do this, right? He is saying, my God is better than your God, because look what I can do. I can come in here and I can take all of these things, and God's not going to do anything. What was going on is that everyone knew the story about the temple. What happens if the people of Israel went inside the temple and touched the furnishings? They died. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar comes in here with his army, and he takes the furnishings, and nothing happens to him. He's trying to prove, listen, my God is better than your God. Daniel is God's answer to that pride. Okay? Daniel and everything that recording that happens to Nebuchadnezzar is watch what I can do. You think your God's better than me? Let me show you who I am. Okay? So this is why we have the book of Daniel. Because of Nebuchadnezzar's pride, and him coming in here and him taking their things out of the temple and putting it in his God, God says, all right, Nebuchadnezzar, just watch. All right, so Jehoiakim is killed. Nebuchadnezzar takes more people captive, and he takes most of the population back to Babylon with him. He only leaves the very poor people. Just the farmers, the people who are the absolute poorest, he leaves behind. Now Jehoiakim has a son, okay, and his name is Jehoiakim. Okay, this is like Elijah, Elisha. Jehoiakim with an N, not an M. Okay, he's 18 at this point, and he becomes king of Judah at 18 years old. He does evil in the sight of the Lord. You'll read that a lot if you read Kings and Chronicles. He did evil in the sight of the Lord. The Lord lets him reign for 3 months. Don't you love God's trial period? You get 90 days to show me what you're going to do. Are you going to serve me or are you going to serve somebody else? After 90 days, God cuts you off. That's the extent of your trial period. 3 months. And he is captured and taken to Babylon. Okay? Now, for 37 years, he is in captivity in Babylon, in prison, okay? But at the end of 37 years, Nebuchadnezzar's son actually releases him and has him sit at his table. He is welcome at the table of the king, and he is taken care of for the rest of his life, but he's in Babylon. Okay, so he's no longer a prisoner, but he is still in Babylon, and he lives out his days at the king's table in Babylon. Okay? Grace and mercy of our Lord, that he is released from prison. He does not die, but he does die in Babylon. Okay? Now, Nebuchadnezzar, we only have one son left. Okay? Poor Mattia here. Mattaniah. he now becomes king, and Nebuchadnezzar changes his name. He changes his name to Zedekiah. Okay? This is very interesting that all of these men had their names changed when they became king. Zedekiah means Yahweh is righteous. Okay? So it's interesting that Nebuchadnezzar changes his name to a Hebrew name. He has a Hebrew name, he changes it to a Hebrew name. Yahweh is righteous. It's an interesting thing. Alright, so Zedekiah is now king of Judah, and he's paying tribute to Nebuchadnezzar. This goes on for about 9 years. And then Nebuchadnezzar decides, I'm fed up. I don't want to pay tribute anymore to Nebuchadnezzar. And he decides to lead a revolt against Babylon. Not such a great thing. He is being influenced by false prophets, and he is absolutely ignoring the warnings of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is telling him time and time again, just as he told his brothers, listen, if you go against Babylon, God is going to judge you. God is using the hand of Babylon to bring us to humility, and we're not listening. Okay? Absolutely ignores the warning. And he decides to join a coalition. So there are other kingdoms out here that are going on, and they're trying to form a coalition against Babylon. And he decides, Egypt hasn't saved us in the past. Let's try these guys. Okay? It doesn't work. Okay? This results in Nebuchadnezzar again leaving Babylon and coming to deal with Jerusalem. Okay? And this time he absolutely just destroys them. So this is 586 BC, a couple years later. He absolutely lays waste to it all. He destroys the temple, he burns down homes, he ruins their land, just absolutely goes in and massacres the whole land, takes everybody he can. He leaves a tiny little remnant left, just the absolute poorest of the poor who can't do anything, uneducated people. He leaves them behind, but he takes everything else with him. Right?
About how many people are we thinking? Like, what are you?
The safe estimations is tens of thousands. This could be upwards of near 1 million people. We don't have exactly how many people were living in the southern kingdom because so many were removed in the northern kingdom, but people would have probably filtered back down, and so we're talking about a pretty extensive population, and they're all being taken to Babylon. See, when the northern kingdom fell, they just told them they had to leave, so they got scattered all over the place. When Babylon comes in, they're like, nope, you're coming to Babylon. So they take everybody back to Babylon. Okay? They're either in prison or they're indentured servants. So there's a lot that gets taken. Okay, so when this third siege happens, Nebuchadnezzar decides that he's going to show Zedekiah exactly who is the boss. He kills all of Zedekiah's sons in front of him. He makes him watch as he slaughters all of his sons. And then he gouges out Zedekiah's eyes, because that is the last visual memory that he has, is watching his sons get slaughtered. Okay? So Nebuchadnezzar does this, and then he takes Zedekiah back to Babylon. Okay? And there he remains in Babylon and dies in Babylon. And we have no more kings left for Israel. Okay? This is the land in the time period that Daniel shows up. Okay? All of this is going on politically with all of these different wars, with all of these different sieges, and this is Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? This is the area and the time period that Daniel shows up on the scene. Now, while all of these sieges are happening, remember, God is speaking through Jeremiah. Okay? And he gives them a promise in Jeremiah 25. You will be taken to Babylon, but for 70 years. After 70 years, you're going to come back. Okay? So this was foretold beforehand what was going to happen to them. There was a promise that God gave them. You will return back to Israel in 70 years. So Daniel knows this. He knows this promise from Jeremiah. We are going to be taken, but 70 years. And that is what he holds on to. And he holds on to that promise for 70 years. And you will see it through the writings of Daniel, that he is looking forward to that day. because he is convinced all of Jeremiah's prophecies has come true. He's watched all of this happen. He knows that that one's going to come true. So he holds on to that one. All right, so let's dig into the rest of chapter 1. So with all of this in your mind, the Hebrew reader would have known all of this that was going on. We're going to jump into Daniel 3. Daniel chapter 1, verse 3. Then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both the royal family and of the nobility, used without blemish, of good appearance, and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's place, and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. Okay? So Nebuchadnezzar orders his men to take the best of the best, the smartest, the brightest, the most handsome young men, and I want you to bring them back to Babylon, and I want you to teach them our ways, teach them our language, teach them our literature, okay? This is my request of you. Now, remember, he confiscated the holy things of the temple. He's also confiscating their royalty, their royal youths who could have rose up and become new kings. He's taking them, okay? And he says that these people are to be able to stand in front of me. Okay. Now Nebuchadnezzar is pretty smart. He is very strategic and very shrewd in this, because not only is this a dig at the people who are left, look, I've got your royalty, but he's also going to use them. They know everything that's happened. They have been trained as part of the royal family in military warfare, in history. So they know everything that has happened in their country. Nebuchadnezzar is going to use them, okay? He's going to use them to his advantage. So he's a pretty smart guy. Makes some poor choices, we're going to find out, but he's a pretty smart guy. All right, verse 5 says, And the king assigned them a daily portion of food that the king ate and the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Okay? Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Okay, so we have Daniel and his 3 friends. We have Azariah. All right, so Daniel and his 3 friends. Now, they're not the only ones. Okay, there are several that are being taken from the royal family. We just know about these 4 by name. Okay, so the king tells the people over them, the steward, I want you to feed them from my table. Now, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, it tells us that he changed their names. Okay, verse 7, And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. To Daniel, he changes his name to Belteshazzar. Okay? Daniel means Yahweh is my judge. Belteshazzar means Baal protect the king. Now Baal, B-E-L, is what they used to reference their god, and their god's name was Marduk. Marduk. He is their main god. They have lots and lots of gods. He's their main god. And Baal is what their term for Lord, how we say Lord when referring to God, they use that term. So it's basically saying, Marduk, protect the king. Hananiah gets his name changed to Shadrach. So Hananiah means beloved by Yahweh. Shadrach means illuminated by rock. This is another one of their gods, and he's the sun god. So it kind of has very similar meaning here. Beloved by Yahweh and illuminated by rock. Rock would illuminate those he loved, those he wanted to protect. So very similar here. We have Mishael, and he gets his name changed to Meshach. Now Meshach means who is like Shach. He's a moon god. Mishael means who is as Yahweh. So who as Yahweh changes into who is like Shach. Okay, and then Azariah, probably the most famous of the names of Billy Goat. He gets his name changed to Abednego. Azariah means Yahweh is my help. Abednego means servant or helper of Nebo. And he's a fire god. Okay? So we have the main god, we have a moon god, a sun god, a moon god, and we have a fire god. Okay? These are all written in the language of Babylon. So this is all Aramaic names. And these are Hebrew names. Okay? So the eunuch changes all of their names, so from henceforth they will be called Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Okay? And for 3 years they're trained. The purpose of all of this is to make them Babylonian. It is full indoctrination here. They wanted to erase their Hebrew past. They wanted to erase their Hebrew God, their Hebrew education, everything about them he wanted to erase and make them Babylonian. Okay? Now, let's go on to verse 8. But Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. Okay. Now, the word defile there means to pollute or to stain. Okay, so it implies that Daniel explained to him why he did not want to eat this food, that it was a religious choice. Okay. Now, Daniel considered the king's food and wine to be that would defile him. Okay, the reason why, there's two main reasons why, is that this food was not kosher. It did not agree with Moses' laws. They ate pig, they ate a lot of pig, and they ate pig in some very disgusting ways. Okay, they would have the pigs walk through the entrails of their enemies, and they would take their enemies' intestines and use it as in making their food. Okay, these are pretty rough people. So not only was the food just absolutely awful because it didn't follow the law of Moses, but they also sacrificed to all of their gods first. Okay? And God told them, do not eat food sacrificed to idols. Okay? Even the wine, they would pour out the wine in front of the idols. Okay? And this is what they ate and drank from. Now, did you notice that Daniel didn't object when his name was changed? Right? You want to call me something else, that's fine. He doesn't object. He doesn't object to learning about the Chaldeans. Fine, you want to teach me your history, you want to teach me your culture, that's fine. He does object to the food because he knows that this is what is against the law of Moses. Okay? This is what is going to defile him if he eats this food. Okay? So he objects, but he objects in a very proper and polite way. He says, I don't want to do this. May I please not do this? Okay? Now this would have been a very courageous decision on a lot of levels. First of all, this order came from the king, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? Remember what Nebuchadnezzar just did to the last guy who defiled him? Zedekiah didn't want to pay him money. He gouges out his eyes and kills his kids. Okay? So this goes in direct rejection to the king. They could have been seen as uncooperative, because remember, they're not the only 4 men that are taken, not the only 4 teenagers. We know that the other ones did. The other ones did eat, okay? They could have been seen as uncooperative. They were far removed from their homes, from their families. It would have been really easy to give in, right? Your parents aren't there, your friends aren't there, you're away from home. It would have been really easy to just give in. They could have thought like God had abandoned them. God allowed the items of the temple to be taken. He allowed these 3 sieges. He allowed most of the population to be taken away. God has abandoned us. Okay? It would have been really easy to think that. And there was real threat of punishment. We've seen so far that Nebuchadnezzar has no problem taking down people who opposed him. Okay? He has no problem taking them down. So God gives favor here. In verse 9 it says, and God gave Daniel favor. It is very clear in the book of Daniel that God has his hand in all of this, because almost every other verse says, and then God, and then God, and then God. So this is in opposition to Esther. If you've ever read Esther, God's name is nowhere in there, but you can see his hand at work. Daniel is making it very clear who's at work here. He has no problem saying Yahweh is the one who does this. So Yahweh gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of eunuchs. And the chief of eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king. I fear Nebuchadnezzar, okay, who assigned your food and your drink. Why should he see that you are in worse condition than the youths of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king? He's being very reasonable here, right? He was put in charge of these guys, and if something happens to him, he's liable, okay? So he's telling them, I'm in charge of you, my head's on the line here. Verse 11, then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Meshach, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then let our appearance and the appearance of the other youths who eat the king's food be observed by you, and deal with your servants according to what you see. Okay? So he says, all right, I understand your concern, and he takes that concern into consideration. He goes, give us 10 days. Okay? 10 days, polite request. Okay? Now, the term that is translated there, vegetables, might not necessarily mean vegetables. It's a word that they would use for sowing. So anything that was grown, anything that had to be sowed into the ground and grown, versus the animals, okay? You don't put animals in the ground, you don't sow them, they repopulate. So it's this distinction here between the king's food that were living animals and the things that were sown. So we're talking fruits, we're talking probably grains, anything like that, anything that was sown. So this is just a vegetarian diet, okay? And water, which is interesting because most water is diluted with wine, okay? The purpose of that is that if you drank water back then, it would be like drinking from another third world country, okay? They don't treat their water. They would get stomach bugs, they would get issues and pesticides and stuff like that. So he asks them to give them water that is undiluted, okay? Because he knows every bit of the wine has been sacrificed, so he doesn't even want a little bit of wine in his water. So he's taking on a big risk here, okay? He's risking his own physical health to drink pure water, water that has not been diluted by alcohol. Okay? And he says, test us after 10 days and see our appearance, and then you can go from there. So verse 14 says, so he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and their wine that they were drinking and gave them vegetables. Now, isn't it interesting that they were fatter at the end of 10 days? I don't know how many of you have been on a vegetarian diet. You do not get fatter. You lose weight, okay? And the other youths are eating everything that is being given to them. So they are gorging themselves on food that they've never had before. They are completely taking it all in because they don't know if they're going to last 3 years, right? If after 3 years they go before the king and the king doesn't like them, they're gone. So they're indulging. And Daniel and his friends are fatter at the end of 10 days and in better appearance. The least that probably would have happened is they would have looked the same. They get fatter, okay? So this is definitely on the hand of God here, that God is in this situation, okay? So he says, so he decides, all right, we're going to take away their food and their wine. We're only going to give them only vegetarian diet and only water. So again, they're in better appearance. It means they're not sick, okay? So the water that probably would have made them sick isn't making them sick. So God is protecting their bodies here. All right, now it says that we also know that the other youths did eat and drink, okay? So we have only these 4 who did not. Everyone else kind of complies with what's going on. So verse 17 says, and as for these 4 youths, God, very clear here, Yahweh, gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now that's going to become important later on in Daniel. Verse 18, and at the end of the time when the king had commanded that they be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king spoke to them, and among all of them, none was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Meshach, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in every manner of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in his entire kingdom. And Daniel was there till the first year of King Cyrus. Okay? So God makes it very clear here in 17. It is not Daniel's diet that makes him smarter. Okay? We have a whole Daniel's diet that gets very popular. you eat this, God will bless you and make you smarter. God's making it very clear here in verse 17. It was God who gave them wisdom. It had nothing to do with their diet. Okay? And Daniel's going to understand visions and dreams. But this comes after his show of faith. Okay? This comes after he has proven to God that he is going to stand. Then God is going to give him extra wisdom and intelligence. Okay? Because even these men who stand the test are not given the special revelation. It only has been given to Daniel. Okay? And we're going to see that there's a lot of visions and dreams that happen in Daniel. Okay? And it says that none were found like him, like these 4 men, 10 times smarter than all of these magicians, all of these enchanters, and the whole kingdom of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar couldn't find people who were smarter than these teenagers. Remember, they're still teenagers. At the end of 3 years, they're only about 17. So they're still just teenagers. Okay? And then at the end there, it says that Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. So he's jumping ahead 70 years in this first chapter. He's saying, I was there in Babylon until the end of the 70 years. Okay? Because we'll get to the last king. Okay? So he's telling them, yep, I was there through it all. Okay? And I'm going to show you through the rest of this book what I saw in Babylon. Alright, so our takeaway here is that Daniel and his friends show us about conviction. That inner conviction can overcome any outside pressure. Okay? They submit to their name being changed. They submit to their doctrine being changed, but they do not submit when it comes to being defiled by the food. Okay? And God blesses them for it because they are obeying the law of Moses. Alright, so what is going to happen in the next chapters is that chapters 2 through 6 are going to cover the next 70 years. So we're going to see a lot of jumping, which is why the history is important of knowing where we are in history. Daniel's not going to tell us everything that happens in 7 years, but he's going to tell us a lot that happens in 7 years. Some very important things that happen over the next 70 years. Chapters 7 through 12, we're going to talk about visions and dreams that Daniel has. Okay? That happens near the end of his time in Babylon because God's getting ready to send them back. Okay? So he's giving Daniel these visions about what is going to happen to the country of Israel, to the people of Israel. And he interprets these dreams for him as well. So he's going to tell them what's going to happen next. So there's a division here. It's not chronological. We're going to study it through, but it's not chronological. All right? And then in chapter 2, we're going to talk about Nebuchadnezzar's first dream. So Nebuchadnezzar has 2 dreams that Daniel interprets, and the first one happens in the next chapter. So, this is the historical context in which Daniel happens. Daniel, as a teenager, is a pawn in all of this political war that is going on. Nebuchadnezzar is at the root of all of this. His pride is what is going to lead to his downfall. But God has been using Nebuchadnezzar to discipline his children. They were warned time and time and time again, if you do not humble yourself and get right and stop worshiping idols, I will let you fall into the hands of those who surround you. Okay? So they were warned, they decided not to listen. Nebuchadnezzar is being used by God to discipline Israel. In that judgment, we see mercy. We see that these people are spared. Okay? We see a lot of people that are living in Babylon, but they become Babylonians. They allow it to take them over. Okay? And Daniel's plea with them for the next 70 years is, don't forget Jeremiah's promise. We're going back. Okay? Your children and your grandchildren will go back to Israel. Don't become Babylonian. We're only going to be here for a short time. Okay. Now, inside the mind of the Israelites, what did they already know has happened to them before? They were in Egypt for 400 years. Okay? They were down here in Egypt as slaves for 400 years. So if you knew that about your history and your people, and you knew that you weren't going to be going back to Israel, it would be very easy to conform. It'd be very easy to just live your life, do your things, and conform. And the book of Daniel is going to show us that God blesses those who don't. God blesses those who stand up, no matter what happens around them, that all of this stuff is going on in a very scary time for Daniel. And God is going to bless him because he does not conform. He is very humble. He is very obedient. But he holds on to his faith that in 70 years he's going back. So he holds on to that. And you will see that happen in every single chapter, that Daniel's holding on to his faith of going back. He's not going to become Babylonian. And God blesses him for it.